Hi, I'm Carys Afoko.
And I'm Gary Young.
Each week, Gary and I talk about the stories in the news that are overreported and the ones that are going completely under the radar and not being talked about enough.
This is Over the Top, Under the Radar.
Gary, it's kind of like I feel a bit emotional about this episode. It's our last live summer recording.
There will be episodes after this all the way through the summer, but they won't be the same format.
We've got some pretty good episodes planned. Next week, we are going to interview Jeremy Corbyn. It's a good one. Stay tuned. It will be dropping in your feed soon.
Yeah, we've got interviews with the author and activist Winnie Edo Lodge, and with the independent candidate, but not independent MP, Faiza Shaheen. And then we will be back in force, rested, tanned.
Full force. I mean, I'm staying in London, so I won't be tanned, but you might be tanned. Okay, so we've got an email from Chris. Diane Abbott is now mother of the house. Why is she not a dame for her services to politics, especially when you see some undeserving characters who were given titles recently? Miss Abbott deserves it. And if she rejects it, that's fine. So thanks, Chris. He emailed us at info@overunderpod.com. Gary, what do you reckon? Dame Diane?
Well, you know, I have a funny story about damehoods. It does involve what will sound like name dropping, but she was a good friend, Andrea Levy. She was
author, wonderful author.
Godmother to my daughter. She'd been offered OBE, MBE, turned them all down, you know, empire, imperialism, no thank you. And then at a certain point, they'd said to, I think it was her agent, what will she accept? Like they really wanted to give her something. And I thought when she told me this, she was going to go, you can't buy me, you know, guy, you think I'll go out for this and that? And she said, dame. And I was like, seriously? And she said, yeah, if I'm going out for the best one. I want a dame.
If you sell out.
Yeah. So she's
sell out for a $5. You sell out for the big stuff.
I get the question. The truth is that, like, if we think about it, she only just made mother of the house, right? They were going to just get rid of her. They were going to disappear her. I went to her office just a couple of weeks ago and there were boxes everywhere. And she said, well, I didn't know whether I was coming back or not. Now she's a mother of the house. I'm not sure she would go for dame.
Yeah, the thing is, it's not, Keir doesn't decide the damehoods. That's the royal family. So like Charles or one of his people could, I just think she's not, I mean, first of all, I'm with Andrea Levy. Dame is a boss title. Yeah, if you're going to sell out to be called a dame. It's just, it sounds great. Dame Carys Afoko. But yeah, I feel like Diane, it would be a co-option, right, of what she represents. Although, yeah, I'll just tell with Diane. She surprises us all times. But have I ever told you about a friend and I have named something a Diane? I told you what we call a Diane?
No.
So do you remember when Diane Abbott got in loads of shit for drinking a can of M&S premixed cocktail on the train?
Yeah.
I.e. the most relatable thing in the world. And so now we call those Dianes. So we'll be like, do you want to go to the shop and get some Dianes for the train? And that's one small way I honour Diane Abbott because, you know, she's a queen. She's a living legend. With a premixed cocktail, which I think maybe she'd appreciate. I don't know her, but I feel like, you know, so we're always like, do you want a Diane? Yeah, let's get a couple of Dianes for the train. I think, Chris, put it on the radar. You know, clearly some powerful people listen to the podcast. Let's put it out into the ether and see what comes back for Dame Diane Abbott. And thank you to everyone who's already supporting us on Patreon. We are going to come back in September, but we can't continue indefinitely unless we get more supporters.
As socialists, we believe in that great Marxist principle, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. And that's reflected in the 3 levels of support we've created, because we can't speak to your ability, but we can speak to our need. If we are going to continue in the vein that we are, providing the space that we do and the conversations that we do, we're going to need your help. We have 3 packages. The Wokarati package, £3 a month plus VAT. The Prosecco Socialist, £10 a month plus VAT. And the Ultimate Comrade, £50 a month plus VAT. All of the packages include Over the Top, Under the Radar weekly bonus episode, access to the WhatsApp private community, and the weekly newsletter. Prosecco Socialist, £10 a month, and the Ultimate Comrade, £50 a month, also include first to know about live and in-person events. We're going to need you to put your money where your ears are.
Okay, so we're going to get into our overs and unders, but just before we do, I know that we're going to talk a bit about American politics. I don't think we can fully immerse ourselves in this moment until we talk about Brat Summer.
So I have seen Kamala Harris being referred to as brat or a brat.
Brat. Important distinction.
I actually tried to look it up and I still didn't understand it. It seemed like it was almost a compliment, although I couldn't really figure it out. So please school me.
By the end of this, you're going to understand the iconic tweet from the last week from Charlie XCX that said Kamala is brat. First question, before we dive in, do you know about Hot Girl Summer?
No. Sounds like something kind of porny.
It isn't, and we're going to dig in.
Good,
so in 2019, Megan Thee Stallion, iconic Texan rapper, dropped a song called Hot Girl Summer. There's a version with Nicki Minaj. It blew up. The internet took the concept of Hot Girl Summer and ran with it. Hot Girl Summer was about living your best life. I mean, if you're really going to lean into the Megan Thee Stallion energy, it's like being promiscuous, having good sex, feeling yourself, dressing up well, Hot Girl Summer. So that was, to my knowledge, the first time that pop culture claimed a season. Okay. Subsequently, there have been a number of other seasonal things. I'll give a quick nod to Short King Spring. So Short King Spring was all about dating men who were shorter than you, popularized by Zendaya and Tom Holland, I believe is her slightly shorter boyfriend.
As a man who is 5'6", I appreciate that.
Yeah, so you missed your Short King Spring, Gary. I mean, it's sort of an evergreen season, but that was a vibe. And so this year, the basic thesis behind this is the kiddies, the internet kiddies, especially the Gen Zs, they love to theme a season. And some of them take off and some don't. Like Feral Girl Autumn, I don't think ever really took up. So Charlie XCX is a millennial British pop star, did a song called Fancy you might have heard of. She was on the Barbie soundtrack. And this year, she dropped the album of the summer, which is called Brat. Marketing campaign was very slick, very hype. There was a billboard in Brooklyn that they kept replacing things with. I think she had 5 launch parties. One was in Dalston Superstore. And so the album is good. It's dancey and it's poppy. But Brat is now also an energy. An energy of Brat is messy party girl.
What does messy mean there?
It's a bit of a reaction to the clean girl aesthetic, which I don't know if it was a season, but it was definitely a mood on the internet, which I'm sure you've seen on Instagram. Clean girls they're perfectly turned out. There's no frizz. Maybe their hair's slicked back in a bun and everything's chic and minimal. So Brat, if Brat were a girl, she'd be in a white vest top, no bra, smoking a cigarette, disposable lighter because she's not organized enough to have a lighter. She likes to party, bit chaotic. And so Brat Summer is that energy, a kind of bit of a hot mess. And it's also a color, a neon green color. So Charlie XCX has claimed a color that's a gross, slimy color, right? So it's a reaction to sort of quiet luxury, chic, beige, everything tasteful. Brat is neon green, chaotic, party vibes. You're having a great time and you don't care. That is Brat Summer. Have I communicated that? You
have. That doesn't sound like a compliment to me.
So it is, because
Okay.
Charlie XX is cool. The songs are cool. And so now it's suddenly cool to be a bit messy and chaotic. And the moment that it intersected with politics was that Kamala Harris, who I probably will talk about given she is now a candidate to be president of the United States, her team, I think the Twitter handle is Kamala HQ, as soon as she announced and as soon as Biden resigned, they changed the color and the branding of the Twitter page, the X page, to Brat Green. So it was a nod to a social media trend. Then the other thing that happened was loads of kind of subversive marketing. So a group of gay guys on Fire Island had printed green t-shirts being like, Kamala is brat. There were already some like social media remixes of Charlie XCX songs with Kamala dancing with a green sort of treatment on them. And then Charlie XCX herself, the icon, the celebrity, the owner of Brat Summer, tweeted 3 simple words: Kamala is brat. And that is basically a cosign. And it's rare. Most of the time when politicians try and jump on a wave, it's cringe, it's gross, and many times the artist distances themselves. But with those 3 simple words, Charlie XCX basically told Gen Zs to vote for Kamala Harris.
I don't understand why she would want to be brat. Do you want Miss Sloppy Braless, representing you on the international scene, getting a bit pissed up, dancing around? I mean, I'm not saying that's who Kamala Harris is, but if that's what brat is, then I don't know.
But brat is cool. Brat can contain multitudes, Gary. Brat can be braless, cigarette, bit drunk, but really it's about not caring and about, in a world where especially women are so conformed to be so sleek and manicured and perfect and male gaze. It's just I don't give a fuck. And you could be brat, Gary. You could be brat. Anyone can be brat. It's not just a color, it's a mindset.
Yeah. Well, if it's about being sloppy, then I'm all in, food on the shirt that kind of, flies undone, just as general kind of raggedy, little bit pissed. All of those things work very well for me.
Yeah.
But then I'm not standing for nothing.
You've gotten over and it's related to, not to Charlie XCX, but to Kamala. So maybe it's a good transition point.
She's my over the top this week. Now, obviously, a lot's happened in the last week. Joe Biden finally, for the love of God, decided to step down. There is also, I've been thinking about this a little bit, the nature of these things. That 2008, there's an economic collapse. George Bush is on his way out. Who should we get to clean up the mess? Black man. Liz Truss crashes the economy, kills the Queen. Who are we going to get to clean up the mess? Asian man. And here we are. Joe Biden goes on too long, despite repeated requests to stand down. Who is now going to try and clean up the mess? Kamala Harris, black woman.
Another reading is, though, that Joe Biden listens to our podcast and...
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes without saying that Joe Biden listens to our podcast. I mean, why wouldn't he?
Yeah. And you would, not only did you talk about his condition, you said, why not Kamala? And I mean, now look what's happened.
Someone had to say it to him. And there are 3 things that I think are important to point out about Kamala Harris so that we understand her currency. The first is that Kamala Harris is not African American. African Americans are those people who have a connection to slavery in the United States. Kamala Harris's father is Jamaican, black Jamaican, and therefore he will have connections to slavery through that. Her mother is Indian. There is a difference between African Americans and black Americans. And African Americans often feel that new immigrants come in and leapfrog them. And that is also true for, say, Caribbean immigrants or African immigrants who haven't had the history that they have had on the soil. And what we've had now are 2 serious black presidential candidates. There have been other African-American presidential candidates, including Andrew Davis at certain times for the Communist Party, but not viable. Kamala Harris is virtually the nominee. There's only been 2 non-white nominees, and both of them are black. Neither of them are African-American.
There's something neat, and we get it here as well as in the US, about being able to tell this immigrant rags to riches story. And there's also something non-threatening about it, right? My family came here and they made it and I made it. And that tells you something amazing about this country. Whereas my family were forcibly brought here and they were brutally raped and terrorized and denied their rights. And then when they finally had a modicum of equality, you zoned them into poor parts of the country and made it really hard for them to get jobs or apartments. And we live with that intergenerational trauma today. I guess it's just a bit more threatening, isn't it?
Well, that's it. African-American story to a lot of white Americans is a bit of a downer. It's not our job. It's not black people's job to make white people feel good. But if you want their votes, then you at least can't make them feel bad. Whereas if you can access a migrant history, then you can tie your experience to other Americans, because they're all immigrants, apart from the Native Americans, who God knows when they'll get president. You can talk about the immigrant history, which, you know, they all love. So Kamala Harris is not an African American. She's also, there was a call went out, and I think this is kind of sad and funny, from Republican leaders warning people not to be racist towards her. And they've been calling her a DEI hire. And there's just a weird thing, because we've all been called, I'm sure you have, I have, throughout my career. Well, you only got that because you were black. And I always say to white people who say that, well, because it's only white people who ever say that. So why did you get your job, do you think? Because underpinning that accusation is that black people could never be qualified for anything, and that white people are naturally qualified for anything. If you fail, it's because you're useless. And if you succeed, it's because you're useless and they promoted you anyway.
Yeah, that sort of thing. It's just like, it's so provably wrong and just says so much about a lot of white people's mindset. It's also a fucking trap. It's the route to a permanent imposter syndrome, because you can never have enough acolytes. You can never have enough letters for racists to believe that you got anything on merit. And actually, Faiza Shaheen, who you'll hear an interview with in August, did a show with David Harewood for the BBC called Britain's First Black Prime Minister. Basically, the concept was to use economic modelling to work out how long it would take for us to get a black prime minister. But it was looking at black communities, people like David Harewood, who grew up working class, and like, given most prime ministers go to Oxbridge, what are the odds? Given most prime ministers XYZ, what are the odds? And actually what they found was that the black people that do make it into Oxbridge, or the sort of top tier white collar jobs that then mean you can become an MP, like, they're actually exceptional. They're not less good than their white peers. They have to be so much better.
So she's not a DEI hire. She is perfectly qualified for the job. The third thing is, she's not a lefty. I want her to win because she's up against Donald Trump. That is a pretty easy choice, but she's not a lefty at all. She pursued some pretty aggressive and unpleasant drug laws in California. She's going to back off a bit from her support for Israel. I think it's important because there was a trap that people got into because Obama was being so horribly racially abused, and because he, quote unquote, looked like change, that people then got a sense of that Obama will fix stuff, and he wasn't promising jack. But she's not a lefty, and that's fine.
She's kind of a cop, right? I mean, that's the slang. Everyone would be like, Kamala's a cop.
In a contest between Donald Trump, that becomes not particularly complicated. In a contest between that and the world that I want to build, well, yeah, so there's going to be work to do.
That kind of connects to my over the top, which I don't know how to title it, Gary. Let's call it the 2-child benefit limit, but it is also that I'm kind of really already over the Parliamentary Labour Party, PLP as it's known.
That didn't take long. What happened?
I'm not over there being a Labour government. Like, I'm glad about the election result. I am happy about that. The behaviour, I think we're going to disagree on some of this, but I'll start with a bit I think we do. So like,
Fight Club.
The absolute fuckery around the 2-child benefit limit vote this week, everything that's happened in Parliament this week, specifically with the Labour Party, has just made me feel so frustrated and just so like eye roll at pretty much everyone in the PLP. Real smoke for the leadership. I've kind of got smoke for everyone. So if you haven't been paying attention, for quite a long time, there has been a debate around a specific policy which gets called the 2-child benefit cap. I think more accurately, the 2-child benefit limit, that was brought in by George Osborne back in the days of austerity, was when it was first floated, when, lest we forget, we had a Conservative government who, if they wanted to boost their poll numbers, would just kick people on welfare or immigrants. The policy is, if you have a third child and happen to be poor, so in receipt of benefits, your universal credit will not be extended to the third child. So let's pretend It isn't horrific to be telling people what to do with their bodies, what size of family they should have. This has been in place for 7 years. It doesn't disincentivize. If you're really serious about making sure that poor people can't have more than 2 kids, then you really need to stop it around the conception phase. So what this policy actually does is when a child arrives in the world and it happens to be the 3rd child in a family where people are in receipt of welfare. And just so we're clear, this isn't just about unemployed people. Most data suggests the majority, between 57 and 59% of people impacted by this limit are in work. This is a policy that most academics, most poverty action groups agree just creates child poverty. The Child Poverty Action Group have said it's probably the single quickest, easiest thing you could do to reduce child poverty in the UK. So it's a shitty policy. Even if you are a right-wing dickhead and think poor people can't have more than 2 kids, this isn't the right way to go about it. So we've got a shitty policy that doesn't work, that comes from a right-wing government 7 years ago. And most people in Parliament now, in the Labour Party, in the SNP, in the Lib Dems, as in their manifesto, don't think the cap is a good thing. We have, again, this sort of like 2 realities. So we have the actual reality where hundreds of thousands, actually more accurately, millions of children are in poverty because of a shitty policy by terrible politicians who hated poor people and boosted their popularity by demonizing them. So we have that. We have cross-party consensus from the SNP, from the Lib Dems, from the Greens, from the Independents, from Labour. This is a bad policy. We have a Labour leadership that is sort of hinting, well, yeah, obviously, undesirable. We don't want to, we're going to do this child poverty review. They don't need any more reviews. Google it, go on the LSE website, like, this is a shitty policy. And so then this vote in Parliament where the SNP tabled an amendment, 7 Labour MPs rebelled, some Labour MPs abstained, and the amendment didn't pass. It was never going to pass with this size of a Labour majority. So we have this parliamentary theatre, which is bullshit and everyone involved is bullshit, about an issue that everyone with power agrees is pretty clean cut. So it doesn't become about like children in poverty, disproportionately like people in single parent families. Again, over 50% of people impacted in single parent families, over 50% of people impacted have at least an adult in work. So like, rather than actually talking about getting rid of this, we get this theatrical vote where Keir Starmer is tough on the left yet again. Nothing changes. The left of the party that did vote against it get to kind of be martyrs and get a media cycle. Keir Starmer gets to brief that he's like super tough and a disciplinarian when actually he's just like weak and a sore winner and like embarrassing. Nothing changes for the children who are living in poverty, whose parents are going to food banks, and there's no timeline for it. And everyone has conducted themselves appallingly. A 7-vote rebellion, that's not good enough. Either
but
make the rebellion bigger.
You can't blame the people who actually rebelled, can you?
Given this is theatre, I wish they'd been better organised. I wish they'd landed a better blow. There's a lot of comparisons to the 1997 rebellion against Tony Blair in December, 100 MPs, resignations, and critically, Jeremy Corbyn will talk about this next week, the chief whip called up all the MPs who rebelled. Jeremy Corbyn talks pretty powerfully about Nick Brown saying to Labour MPs, you can rebel and you'll still be a Labour MP tomorrow. Well, under this Labour leadership, you're not a Labour MP now. You have a 6-month suspension. Appalling, disgusting, draconian, controlling, ignoring the fact that these MPs were elected to represent constituencies, not to like clap Keir Starmer for whatever he does. I also just feel a bit underwhelmed, given we've known this was coming, that really all we could muster, and that the left was split. We've got some lefties like Nadia Whittam saying, and Bel Rubber-Addy saying like, I abstained. At least a line on whether you're going to abstain or vote against. Like, I'm not suggesting everyone is equally to blame, but I am just a bit bored with the theatre, and I'm a bit bored with the PLP that's got so toxic that no one can just broker a fucking conversation. The worst part of all of it is it's just over £3 billion a year. And the thing that gets briefed to all of the lobby journalists who sometimes I'm like, just let Keir and his team write it, because you're not really interrogating what they've told you, is like, well, slippery slope. If they find $3 billion for the poor kids, like, where does it end? And it's like when your mate rocks up in a Tesla and says they can't afford to eat out. That's where I'm at. And I think the 7 MPs, I'm disappointed. Do better. If you're going to rebel, rebel big.
Yes, I hear you. And I, as the third child in my family, it's tough enough being a third child. There are no pictures of me.
What?
I was often referred to as the other one. What? Reba had another one? Yes, this is her other one, in the way that Caribbeans, do. Do you remember
Wait,
Bigfoot
sorry.
Johnny?
There were no pictures of you. What are you talking about? Third
As a
children always do
child, as a
this.
little child, there were no, I think the first.
Because
picture
everyone was
that come-
bored.
Everyone was bored, and my dad had left, busy, 3 kids. I ain't taking a picture of you. Whereas, my brother, he of the fancy snacks, who was the firstborn, and they say, like, you as a third child, you are treated more leniently, and that is true.
No, that is true. You get to do everything. Youngest gets to do everything.
Okay, oldest lady. But yeah, that would have been me. My mum was working, and as a single parent family, we qualified for quite a lot of things. So anyway, so there's that. I think, first of all, we do have to take on this phrase, and Francis Ryan did a brilliant job in The Guardian talking about what does it mean when you say fiscally responsible? You're making a choice that some kids will go without food. Like, who is this fiscal responsibility for? I cannot agree with you about the rebels. I mean, I do think that there needs to be more organisation on the parliamentary left. It would be better if the left didn't go just down to heroic, martyrish defeat. But in those moments where there is some strategic confusion or insufficient strategic agreement, I think it's quite important that some people were like, well, I'm just not doing that.
I'm frustrated that there wasn't a better strategy and a bigger rebellion. And I guess where I disagree with you is these attacks on the left have been happening for some time, and people like John McDonnell have been in Parliament for some time. And yeah, I just kind of wish they had a few more moves or like a bit of a better plan. Most of my anger and ire is directed towards the Labour leadership and the whips and the media for just kind of happily parroting that whatever Keir Starmer does is like he's a genius. And just, for those of you that don't know, lobby journalists, they all sit together, they work really closely with politicians, and like there's a lot of just briefing. You just kind of sidle over and say, well, actually what Keir did was a stroke of strategic genius. And it's like, it does get a little bit boring that no one's interrogating it. And again, like the god and the don of the Labour right is Tony Blair. He had a little bit of grace in victory, and he and the Labour leadership treated the left of the party like, not like they were pals, but that they had a place. And I guess that's where it really feels dissonant with what's happening in America, of like, there is a place for the left in the Democratic Party. There is a place for the left in the Labour Party. That idea of like disagree and commit. We disagree on certain things, but we're fundamentally in a team. And I think the energy spent bullying and harassing, especially if you hear some of the stuff that Zara Sultana and Absama Begum talk about in terms of how they were treated, is bad. And then I also think it's quite scary because this is at the point when you can be quite magnanimous. You've won, you've got all of the power, you locked loads of people out of selection. So like the number of lefty MPs is even smaller. Corbyn's not even in the party. And still your instinct is to like turn on the left, punish the left, beat the left. This is a remaking of the PLP in a way that's quite scary. And it should be scary for the backbench MPs who are happy to back the leadership because they got a shiny new job and maybe they want to be a junior minister and like, things can only get better. But like, this is how they behave when they don't need to be aggressive. So like, how are they going to behave when things are tougher, the majority is tinier? And then how are the left going to behave when you've banned them from the party? It just feels like it's just a shit show, Gary. This isn't going to be enough. If this is all the left have got, this isn't going to be enough.
So my under is Hare Hills, the confrontations that took place in Hare Hills. Now, at a certain point, this might have been an over. I saw it come up on my feed. There's rioting in Hare Hills, which is an area of Leeds. So what happened in Hare Hills, as it transpires, is that a family of Roma, the children had been taken from their parents to stay with extended family in this area of Leeds. Then there was a tip-off, don't know who from, that the children would then violating a court order, the children were then going to be taken abroad. And so social services came in to stop that from happening. Now, what I'm not going to do is comment on the specific nature of that situation, because I don't know whether the children are in danger of being taken away. I don't know what their circumstances were. Child protection is important, and that it wouldn't be helpful to just start running your mouth about some people lying and other people, and other people telling the truth and all the rest of it. So I'm not going to talk about a specific case, but we can talk in general. And there are a few things to say. The first, because the reason it fell out was because there was an assumption originally that it was intercommunal violence, Muslims, different ethnic groups, certainly Muslim involvement. There was a riot in Hare Hills in 2001 over an alleged miscarriage of justice with the police. Nigel Farage, that grifter from America, chimed in on Twitter. The politics of the subcontinent are currently playing out on the streets of Leeds. Don't say I didn't warn you. Well, Nigel, did you warn us which subcontinent you were talking about? Or was that you just being sub-educated? This was not Asia at all. It's not to say that people whose parents were from the subcontinent or have descendants in the subcontinent might not have taken part in the confrontations that ensued. That I don't know. Given that there's a high migrant rate in the area and a high minority rate in the area, there's a good chance that they did. But this wasn't the politics of the subcontinent playing out on the streets.
He doesn't even know what that means. Someone taught him that word. He doesn't
know what that means. This is an example, a clear example of a racist assumption, and this racism has an effect. But here's the thing. The Roma are the biggest minority in Europe. They're the largest ethnic minority in Europe. You go to places like Slovakia, Czechia, Hungary, as I have to write about them. I remember interviewing someone Romanian in Bristol about Brexit, and she said, well, one of the problems that we have is that people think that because we're Romanian, we are Roma. And she said, so they think that we're lazy and we're criminals. And I said, do you think that's true about the Romans? She said, oh, yes, that's true about them, but we're not them. I remember in Hungary going to see a family who the entire town had come out to cheer them being expelled from the town. This was in 2003, particularly in Eastern Europe. This is a group of people who have a really hard time, but they have a hard time here too. Their kids are twice as likely to be referred to social services. This could be because those communities are deficient in raising their children. I don't think that's true. Bearing in mind that they're poorer, and so it's not that poorer people are deficient in raising their children, but that the poorer you are, the harder it will be to raise your children in society that we have, particularly when you have a government and a policy like the 2-child cap that we were mentioning before. But as a child, my mother was referred to social services with a suggestion that we be taken away because my eldest brother, he of the fancy snacks, used to push me in a wheelchair to my childminder. There were no roads that had to be crossed. My mum would see us across the road, but then she had to go to teacher training college. And if she was going to get the bus, then my brother had to take me to the childminder. No road crossed. And someone reported my mum.
Where does the wheelchair come in?
Well, because I was like 1 or 2.
Okay, in lieu of a pushchair. I got it.
Yes.
I'm glad you brought it up. As someone who saw the social media, like the very striking images of burning buses and flipped police cars, I think it was a local councillor who was not white talking. And yet it's like that sort of coded part of your brain. It's just like fire, disorder, non-white people, some sort of a riot. And like that is clearly what Nigel Farage did. But the connection, I think you're really right to name that for Roma and Traveller, and some people identify as gypsy communities in the UK, I'm loath to say it's the acceptable form of discrimination, but there is something that happens where, so A, these are communities who are, I think, without knowing the specific family, over-policed, like over, social services and police and state intervention is disproportionately used on poorer communities and marginalized communities. There is certainly no higher instance of something like domestic violence. It cuts across class, but like certain communities are seen as problems for the state to solve. And then, I do also think there's this thing where there hasn't been, I've certainly had to call friends up on like really sketchy comments made about people who were Roma or travellers who I would consider to have like otherwise good politics. I used to live near a traveller community, and there was this sort of segregation of, there was a pub that was like the traveller pub that we didn't go into, which I think was just being respectful of, people having space. Has since gentrified. And then there was a hipster pub, which, shock horror, I drank at. And there was a time when a group of travellers came into that pub and basically from jump, it was a matter of time until the police were called or they were asked to leave. As far as I could tell, I wasn't following the situation closely or filming on my camera phone. Shout out to those classy people. There was a sense of like, you don't belong here and you're going to do something wrong. So we're going to call the police even before that happens, because like you shouldn't be here. And it was such as someone who is very grateful to people with my identity who came before me, who campaigned against colour bars and made it so that in a lot of spaces in the UK, I can walk in and maybe not always feel welcome, but feel I have a right to be there. I couldn't think of another community who would be so quickly driven out of that pub. And also that weirdness of like all the crap that's in our brains from all the prejudices that we absorb from the media and from politicians, that it's like, riot. Okay, black or brown people. Oh, travellers. Oh, and then there's no more curiosity because, well, that's what those people do, right?
Well, or I think there's a weird thing. Rioting is kind of somewhat off-brand for the way in which the bigotry that's assigned to them, which is why I think it didn't get any traction. It was like, oh, weird, Roma. Well, what are we going to do with that? If it's Muslims, we can go to Western values and integration and this and the other. And if it's black people, well,
and talk about police
and policing and fried chicken and there's no parents. But what are we going to do with it? Is we want to do anything with it.
My under the radar, I didn't think this would be an under the radar, but I feel like it is at the moment, is the Tory leadership contest.
Oh.
Yeah. We're not talking about it. I want us to talk a little bit about it because it's the first thing is it's so long, Gary. It's so long.
How long?
We're going from July till November. So,
that's kind of awesome, actually.
For those Tory MPs listening, nominations opened Wednesday, 24th of July at 7 p.m. That's the start of the gun. You've got until Monday, the 29th of July, if you're a Tory MP. You need a nomination. You need 10 MPs, not that many, and you can nominate yourself, which we all know some people, Suella, would do. So we could potentially have 12 Tories. Then we've got August for summer holidays / campaigning. There'll definitely be at least one of them that just like goes to a Greek island. The first knockout happens in early September. The Parliamentary Tory Party, I don't know what their acronym is, they're going to have a vote and knock some people out. Then there'll be Tory Party Conference, which they keep calling a beauty pageant. They're like, this will be the beauty pageant for the candidates, which I think there's a bit of,
For a beauty pageant, do you not need beautiful people?
I don't want to see James Cleverly in a swimsuit. Like it's no shade to him.
You're on your own there. You're on your own.
Yeah, I mean, of the available
Cleverly
options.
In a pair of Speedos,
Yeah.
I'm up for that.
He's not, I mean, maybe he's a silver fox, but everyone has their different opinions and I don't want to yuck anyone's yum. So then we've got the beauty contest of Tory Party Conference. And then you'd be like, okay, well, you'll pick then. No. Then the Parliamentary Party will whittle it down to 2 and the ballots will finally close on the 31st of October and the new leader will be announced on the 2nd of November. Part 2. This means Rishi Sunak, who, let's all be real, when he was like, I will stay on and serve, was thinking like, I'll do the summer and then I'll piss off back to California. The visa's still good. Get the girls into school. So Rishi's going to be here till November. No one wants that. He's doing this weird like divorced dad thing in Parliament where he makes all these sort of odd jokes. Like at PMQs, he did this weird self-deprecating joke about Olympic team and he's a loser. Like it's getting a bit sad and weird. And now I'm like, I don't feel sorry for him, but I'm a bit like, are you okay? And also like, you can't do a gag about losing the election until November. There aren't that many gags and you're not that funny. So there's that, more Rishi, more Tories. No one wants that. And then the low threshold, 12 MP, you're going to get all the wacky racist people out. And to get attention, they're going to say wild things, Gary, and I'm going to have to hear them. But we do need to talk about it, because once they do pick a leader in 100 years, they're going to become quite important. And whether they want to accommodate reform, how they come at Keir, like suddenly this person's going to be important. So the process is important and the outcome is important. But I mean, Gary, I don't have it in the tank.
I kind of do, because I think it's going to be entertaining, but I do understand that it will probably be awful. I think a few things. First of all, we do need an opposition. There does need to be an opposition. I'd rather that it wasn't them, but they are the second largest party. So the second thing is, who would want that job? I mean, that, you're herding cats there. On a more lighthearted note, I'm wondering if we couldn't do it like Big Brother or some kind of reality thing,
I'm a Celebrity. I mean, they all do I'm a Celebrity anyway when they feel like the coffers are empty. Yeah, I like it. Put them in a house. What about we use a Love Island villa? That'll be going spare soon. Whack them all in. Summer of love.
See, I just threw up in my mouth a little bit then when you said that. I'll be interested to see if someone can come up with what a modern Conservative Party would look like, because there is this challenge on the centre right that you're seeing all across the Western world, most obviously in the US, where the whack jobs have completely taken over, but elsewhere where the pressure from kind of nativist, fundamentalist, xenophobic people has been too great to resist. And one electoral logic would be if we can edge half the Tories want to unite with reform. And while that seems like a scary idea, there is a logic in that. If that was one party, they would have lost a lot less seats. Reform did split their vote. But I think that if they go that route, they shrink in terms of relevance. The truth is the Republicans did that and they still they shrank and then they grew. And the logic was always that the Republicans would have to be more minority friendly and this and that, but in a country that was becoming more and more diverse. But actually with Trump, they went the other way, and it's not like it's not working.
Republicans absorbed the MAGA people, the Tea Party people into the party, whereas they've got Farage sat on their right shoulder, metaphorically. So yeah, you're right. Do you double down and get a Suella in, or do you go like James cleverly Tom Tugendhat? Don't know if that's how you say his name. The more like centrist dad energy.
I do think it's consequential, even though it's going to get very, very weird.
We could be getting peak crazy. Could be wild out here.
See, I think it's ambitious that you think that this is going to be the peak, but I feel like we're only halfway up the mountain.
Hold my beer. You're right. Hold my beer. This is just the first leader of the opposition. We got a few more to go.
But that is a very good under. Watch that space. I want to thank you for listening to Over the Top and Under the Radar. Remember to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Make sure you sign up to our newsletter at overunderpod.com.
If you want to support the show and you have the money, then put that money where your ears are. Find us by searching Over the Top, Under the Radar on Patreon.
And we are on social media. We are on X. We are on Instagram. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. We are on TikTok. You can find us with the same handle on all of those platforms at over_under_pod_. And if you could rate and review the podcast on the platform you listen to it, it helps more people to find it. If you could share the podcast on social media, it helps more people to find it. And we want to grow the community and have more listeners so we can make more lovely podcasts.
Have a great summer.
Are you going to have a brat summer, Gary?
I'm not there yet. Although if brat is about being sloppy, then every summer is a brat summer for me.
However you're celebrating summer, have a wonderful summer. Thank you for listening.